Hi, my name is Tom Givo, and I'm going to do a walkthrough of the OpenXML SDK and Graph workshop tutorial. I'm going to start today with an introduction into what this tutorial is all about, followed by getting into the modules of the tutorial itself and just walking through it. I find that's the most productive thing, and that consists of workbook generation and data-driven sheet generation. Some of the prerequisites that you'll see already in the module listed in the tutorial modules are that we use Visual Studio, Community Edition is fine, the OpenXML SDK, the productivity tool, and the Office Desktop Excel application. So what I'd like to have as an outcome for you is for you to have some familiarity after this with the OpenXML SDK, see it in use, and then the Office OpenXML file format, which is what the SDK manipulates, and then the Graph Explorer for creating data. Okay. Some of you have seen in other workshops, some of you have seen the Focus application, and you've seen this demoed. It is a Teams application that makes use of Graph and Planner and various other technologies, image processing and analytics APIs. So it's a really cool application, and it demonstrates some of the power of Teams applications and first-line worker scenarios. The part where we come in here for this tutorial is that there's a UI command or element for generating a report. And you may have seen this demoed, maybe you haven't, but this is what it looks like here. And generally when this is clicked, you get a report that looks like this. It's a worksheet called general report.xlsx. This looks like this. And this is what we're aiming for today. So I want to walk you through this tutorial so you can see how this was generated and so that you can have the code and later peruse it and understand how we generate this report and how you can do it in a custom way off of graph data. Okay? So the big picture here is that we have two modules. First module, we're going to focus on auto-generating the Excel workbook based on generated code from the SDK, from the productivity tool. And the second module, we focus on first creating the JSON data that we drive this sheet generation from the Graph Explorer, and then modifying that code to customize it with the graph data. Okay, a little bit about the OpenXML SDK. It is an open source on GitHub framework built around or distributed by NuGet and built around C#. It has been forked a lot, and it has also been shared a lot. It's also been downloaded. It is highly adopted in industry and used in both enterprise and other applications. It is built on C#, as I mentioned, in Visual Studio and .NET Core, which makes it cross-platform. So now let's stop the presentation and get right into the tutorial where we can work on this code. Okay, I'm going to share my desktop, and we're going to work through the tutorial. You should be, if you're following along with me, you should be in a browser looking at this page here. Okay, this is github.com, interop events, exporting data with OpenXML tutorial. This is where we start. And if you go here, you're going to see a README. And the README gives a little of the background I just talked about, screenshots of what we're aiming for, some prerequisites, including Git command line tools, which are not absolutely necessary. I tend to like to use them, but you can certainly download using the zip file instead, and then just unzip it, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. And so let's go ahead and get started. I want to pause here just briefly. We usually have a local share right here where we keep the SDK productivity tool because it is fairly big. It's kind of hefty. And I want to just pause here for us to display if that has changed because I pre-recorded this, this tutorial walkthrough. Okay. All right, great. So now that you've got that, the first thing we're going to do is start by cloning this repository or using the zip file. So I'm going to go to my command line. I'm going to copy this command, and I'm going to come here and just execute the command. This is what it looks like here. And if I execute it, I will pull down the entire tutorial project. And we'll switch into the folder, okay? And you'll see we've got the project here. So let's keep going. Okay, so the productivity tool is also on GitHub here. If we don't have a share or you haven't gotten it yet, you can download it from here. It's big, so it may take more time to download. And then the working solution is here if you want to have it for reference as you're working through this. If you make a mistake or something, you can always go over and look at it. But the code and the steps to do it are pretty simple. So let's start with module 1, okay? Let's get into this. All right, what's the first thing we're going to do here? So the first thing we're going to do is to generate, we call it reflect, but it's really a generation of the code based on an existing workbook. So let's bring up the SDK productivity tool. If you go to start, run, if you've installed it using the MSI installer, you'll see that it's here in your start command or your start menu. Okay, so I've already got this running. If you hit that, this is what you should see. And I know it's a little bit small, but I'll blow it up a little bit for you. But this is what you should see, okay? And the next thing we're going to do is open up this. So we're going to open up the example report. This is where we're starting. We're going to build off of this report, okay? So we open up the productivity tool, we go to open file, and you can navigate to, and I've already got it here, but you can actually navigate to where you downloaded the tutorial and go into that assets folder. And I'll pause for just a second for you to find that. Okay, and I know I'm going fast on this, and if you don't keep up, definitely you can do this later, and we have the recordings available for you so you can go at your own pace. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this in. When I do this, notice that what I get is a nice folder view of what the document is. This is the OpenXML SDK OPC, or Open Packaging Convention, and within it's basically a zip file, and within it it's got a bunch of parts, and I can actually drill down through these into the workbooks and the worksheets, and these are all XML parts and elements. Eventually I'll see, you know, elements in here, and we'll see what, you know, and they've got attributes and various things, and it's very small. I'll show it to you there. Okay, so nice. So we've got that open. We can now inspect it, but the great thing is we're going to reflect this code. We're going to generate it. So the next thing we're going to do is say reflect code, okay? And we'll end up with a bunch of code here that will actually be perfectly suited for generating this entire workbook. So let's go ahead and do it. Make sure that you have here the top node here. The top node should be highlighted before you say reflect code, okay? So now let's say reflect code, and now what we have here is a whole bunch of C# code that will generate this package for us, okay? So let's put that on hold. We're going to just put that aside and continue. Okay, so now let's set up our project for use by the SDK. So the practice solution contains a starter project. It's a very simple starter project. Doesn't really have any code in it. I'm going to copy this, and I find the easiest way for me is just to go to that root folder. So let me just clear this, go to that root folder and use the relative path that I put into the tutorial. This is what it looks like here. And just say start on the solution file, and that quickly brings up the Visual Studio project. It's a starter project. There's really nothing in it. While that's going on, let's look at the next step that we want to do. The next thing we're going to do is load the NuGet package. Okay, so, the SDK NuGet package. All right. So let's go over here. After it's done loading, it looks like it's done restoring itself and getting itself together. And you can see the module really doesn't have much of anything in it there. It's very, very nothing there. So let's go into the NuGet package manager, git browse, and we're going to type document format and then I already have it in here. If you start with document format, you can search on that, but it's document format.openxml. You can see that here and right there. Okay, the first thing that shows up there should be the document format.openxml package. Let's select the whole project to install, and as you can see, we have the latest stable version is 2.11. That's correct. So let's go ahead and install that. And let's hit OK to agree to install it. OK. And looks like we're done. So we can go ahead and close the NuGet package manager. OK, go back to the tutorial and let's follow along. OK, so now we've done that. We've accepted this. This is a note in case you are loading a Visual Studio project and it's got some packages in it. You may need to do a restore because when they come down from GitHub, they aren't always restored. Ours did restore and it was an initial project anyway, so no worries there. Okay, so now let's get that reflected code and add it in. So what we're going to do is add a new item here. So we're going to go to the report generator project, add new item, and we're going to call it generator.cs. So just copy that from here to make it easier so I don't have to keep typing. And let's go over here, report generator, and add new item. So this is what it looks like here. Okay. Okay, so report generator again, add new item. Okay, C# class, and then we'll copy in the name. Okay, very good. So this is what you should have, this right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that module in. Now we have this new module. Go ahead and select it. And the next step in the tutorial is going to be, let's copy all that code in. First, let's select in that module the namespace and class that it gave us, and we're going to replace that with what the SDK productivity tool gave us. Very simple to do. So let's just take that whole thing, leave the usings in place for now. We're going to need those, leave those. And then let's go back to the productivity tool that we set aside and right click and say copy all code. Okay. And it already copied it, so then we'll come in here and we'll hit paste. It takes a while because it's pasting a whole bunch of code in here, okay? So let's now take a look. So now we have those first three usings and a whole bunch of more usings that we need that was generated by us for us by the productivity tool, and then a whole bunch of other stuff here that generates all these little parts and bits that we saw in the productivity tool when we broke open the package. So let's go back over here. And now, and notice here that I put in some learn items. This is where you can dive deeper into what's really happening here. And these are some links to documents to give you a better idea of what's really going on. Okay, so let's find we're going to copy some things here. We're going to fix up the code. So we're going to go into that code we just pasted. We're going to find the namespace generated code and replace it with report generator namespace. Okay, so here, this, okay, and we're going to replace that just like that. namespace report generator. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is find public class generated class and change that to generator because that's the name that we're using in the generated code. Funny enough. Okay, so that should look like this. Great. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to program CS where it just has that boilerplate code, and we're going to put in calls to that generator function and that create package, the generator class and create package. Okay, so let's do that. Go over to program CS, and instead of just hello world, we're going to do this, and now it should look like this. Okay, so back over to the tutorial and we see what it should look like. Now we're ready to build it to make sure it runs, and then we're going to generate. So let's build it, and let's also take the target file over here, and I'll explain what we're doing there. We're going to actually tell it in our application arguments where to put the generated file. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's hit Control-Shift-B. Okay. And build. Looks like it's probably going to work, which is great. And then we're going to go into project properties. Okay, go to the debug tab, and we're going to paste in the target report, the target report worksheet, and so that'll get picked up in the program CS. So we'll hit Control-S to save that. In program CS, we'll pick up these arguments here, the arguments right there. Okay, and now we can hit, let's just follow along, make sure. We can now hit Control F5, and as soon as we do that and run this thing, we'll be able to look at this spreadsheet. So let's do it, hit Control F5, or hit F5. Okay. Looks like it ran, so it says hit enter to finish. In this case, we do have a prompt, and in the module 2, we don't, so we'll just know to hit any key when done, wherever any key is on the keyboard. And then we'll do start, and we're using the base. I like to use the root of the repo where I downloaded and just use those relative paths that I provide in the tutorial. It's a little easier. So you can see what I'm doing here. Just start and then the relative path to the module 1 generated report. And this should load the Excel spreadsheet. And there we have it. So we've done it. We've successfully taken an Excel worksheet or workbook, fed it into the productivity tool, generated code, and now we can generate these worksheets at will over and over and over again programmatically. And you can see it's the same report. Okay, so I'm moving quickly here. What we're going to do is move on to module 2. So I'm going to close this sheet. We don't need this open anymore because in module 2 we're actually working with a project in Visual Studio. We're working with a project where we left off in module 1. So let's move on to module 2. Okay, and moving right along, we're going to go, first thing we're going to do here is generate some graph data for us. So let's go to the Graph Explorer. If you click on this link, you'll see something that looks like this. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, is we want to look in the left-hand panel for the planner queries. So in Graph Explorer, we have a number of queries here that call the Graph REST APIs, and we have Planner is a grouping of these, okay? And so what we're going to do is select the one you can see here, Planner. There's a bunch of different queries we can do that get things from our Planner application and tasks. What we want is this one right here, down at the bottom, this one that's highlighted, all Planner tasks for a plan. So let's go ahead and click that. And when you click it in Graph Explorer, when you select it, if it is something that can be without any additional input, like a GET with no request body, then you'll see that it calls the API. So this is a GET request. It's an HTTP GET request to this REST API. and you'll see that this is the URL for it. This is how it calls it, with a ID here in the REST API for a stock data plan that they're using, okay? And down here we have some data. So now we've generated some data. This came from a default sample plan, okay? Let's go back to our tutorial and keep going. So now we've got the data. What we want to do is actually put this into a file, a JSON file that'll get read. So I'm going to go ahead and open that using this relative path again, because that works for me. I'm going to use my favorite editor with that relative path. And you can use Notepad, you can use whatever you want to do this, okay? So I'm going to use GBIM here, and I'm going to copy the data from Graph Explorer. So I'm just going to select here and do a select all and copy, okay? And then back over to my editor and paste it in, okay? So this is the JSON data. You can see it here, a little bit prettier looking with the colors, but this is the JSON data, and now I just want to make sure that I save that, okay, and then I'll put it aside. So hit save in Notepad or whatever your editor is, and then let's continue on, okay? So we're doing great here. We've got our data. Now we're going to load up the solution, which is it's a solution that we've copied over for you into Module 2, and it starts where Module 1 left off, okay? So we're going to load that up, okay? Again, we do a start and the relative path to the data. Let's copy that again, make sure I get it, okay? And now we're going to load up that solution, and while that's loading up, let's take a look at the next thing. So we're going to take a look at some of the new code here, and this is, we'll be looking at this code, and also we'll be looking at where the JSON data gets processed and fed in generator.cs, okay? So here we are, it looks like it's loaded. We've got generate task data worksheet, okay? And when we look at that, this is the code that we originally had, and actually this is the new code, and these are replacements for two of the functions that were in the generator CS that we generated earlier, okay? So if you see, we'll actually point out where those are, but they're basically in the worksheet content here, and also this table definition generation here. Okay, so now let's keep going. Oh, and also the JSON generation code is in here. Sorry, in here, and it is in the init data. So you can see that we've got a relative path that we're using to that JSON file we just created. It will find it, and then it will load it in and then process it. It will serialize it using system.text.json functions, okay, as you can see there. And then it will be able to use that as an object in the report data object. So let's go back and continue on. So now we want to make a couple of more modifications. Those modifications will simply plug in our new algorithmic code that we've added, and that's these ones right here. So I'm going to copy these, okay, and replace these two calls with the new ones. So we'll go here, come down and find the worksheet, part 1 content, and the table, that's these 4 lines here, and we'll copy these in, and notice, you'll expand these here, notice that I've commented out the original code so you can see what we've changed, and now we're calling the new ones, which are algorithmically designed to pull in the JSON data and drive that worksheet data, okay, or drive that worksheet generation, okay. So now we've done that. which is great. We also want to do the same thing we did with Module 1, and that is tell it where to put the worksheet. So we'll go over to Project, Properties, and Debug, and tell it in the arguments to this is where we're going to put it. Save this, and I think the next thing, we're ready to let this run, and we'll hit F5. Oh, before I do that, we'll copy where we actually have the worksheet so we can quickly open it up and take a look. Okay, so now let's go back to our back here, and we will hit F5. Let's just have the code here instead. We will hit F5. And as you can see, it'll build it and then it'll run it. Now we don't have the prompt here, but we do have a whole bunch of output that shows that we're updating cells and generating those. So we'll go ahead and hit enter, and it looks like it ran. So now let's go back to our prompt, and we're going to do that same thing. We're going to open that spreadsheet using the relative path from the tutorial, just like this, okay? When I do that, it should come up, okay? And this is the sheet that we've generated. So it was like the other sheet we generated, but we've done some customization, and now we've customized it so it's driving this table data off of JSON data that we got from Graph instead of just the original data that was literally translated in. And you might be saying, well, why are there only 2 tasks? Let's go back to the file that we created, the JSON file. Well, there are only 2 tasks in this sample planner data, okay? So that makes sense, that works. And there were no emails or anything you can see in here. We didn't have any email, user emails. We only have IDs for them. There would normally be additional fields showing the emails. So great, so we actually have accomplished pulling in the data. If the data was more complete, it would have filled these in, but since it wasn't, and now we can take a look at this cover sheet. Look, it's actually been adjusted for the number of tasks and their states. They are not started, and you'll see that the graph looks appropriate here, and the data all looks right, okay? So let's go back to, one thing I want to do is go back to, I'll stop sharing my desktop, and we'll go back to the PowerPoint presentation just for a moment. And I'm going to present that here in Teams. And I just wanted to show you, it's like maybe it's not loading. Okay. Here. Okay, so I'm going to share this, and let me just okay, I just wanted to show that I've got some tools that I've referenced at the end of the deck, the PowerPoint deck, including the productivity tool, but there's a couple of others that you might find useful. And then also support resources. So if you have any issues using the SDK, you should go to the GitHub page and log an issue there if there's some problem with it, a bug or whatever. If you have a problem with or a how-to question, typically go to Stack Overflow, and then open specifications, doc help at Microsoft.com, and this forum link below at the bottom of the page. If you have any questions about the open XML file format itself, this is an open standard, but we do support it. We do have implementation notes on it, and we do provide support for implementers who are using it directly. So for the SDK, the GitHub page, for any questions directly about the standard and Office's implementation notes, come to dochelp@microsoft.com. Okay, I hope this has been useful for you. I hope that you've enjoyed going through this and you are enjoying going through it on your own. Take some time later to get into the code and understand it better. And if you have any questions while going through this, of course, you can be asking these on the Q&A chat during the talk. All right, thank you very much.